Hello everyone, and thanks for joining this micro session. Today we're going to be talking about staying on pathway and what to think about if that question pops into your mind about whether you should defer or not. I'm Jenny Pelling, I'm the Director of Apprenticeship Development and Diversity at Kaplan, and today I'm joined by Matthew Dean, one of our tutors. Hi Matthew.
Hi, Jenny.
So Matt, let's go straight into it. What would you say to students who are, say, approaching their exams but don't feel they're quite ready and they're wondering whether they should defer as an option?
I think that's a very common feeling for students to have, and it always feels like there is more that you could do, more practice, more questions you can try, always something that can be reread. And it's a very rare thing to feel fully prepared for an exam. I don't think I felt fully ready for a single one of my exams throughout the ACA, and was always kind of pleasantly surprised in terms of what came up and how it went. When we're in that mindset ahead of the exam, we can tend to catastrophize about what might happen in the exam, what might come up. But it's much more likely that it'll be in line with what we've been practicing and what we're expecting and preparing for. The thing about the ACA is it's very, very different to exams that we've experienced beforehand. So when we've been at school or when we've been at university, we've been told, you should be aiming for 80s and 90s for A's and A stars. You should be aiming for 70s and 60s to get 2-1 or a first. And now we're being told that 55% is a brilliant score. So you might be preparing for your exam and try mock exams, getting less than half of it right, and yet still being on the right track for where you want to be. And that mindset change can lead to a lot of anxieties and a feeling that you're less ready than in fact you are. And it's likely that you're more ready than you think you are. So what is most likely and most common for students to feel is that they've got a lot of knowledge gaps or technique gaps. And often students just say, I need more time. I need more time between now and the exam. If that's the case and that's where you are, it's really, really common. What you need to do is you need to voice that, and you need to reach out to your tutor as early as possible. And where relevant, PQ and professional qualifications can support you as well. And what we can do is we can just talk to you and think about what the best way is for you to help you to achieve success. What's likely is that you've got fewer and smaller knowledge gaps than you think, but once you speak to someone, you can actually get an objective perspective on where you are against where you need to be and a plan from getting from A to B. You should also remember that as well as your tutor, there is a team of expert tutors within academic support on hand as well, and they're available 7 days a week, so they can help with any kind of academic questions that you might have along the way.
Yeah, that's really helpful. You mentioned a little bit earlier about, staying on track and being on track. What are the benefits to staying on track?
But I think that the biggest argument there is that if you do go down the pathway of deferring, all you're doing is kicking the can down the road. And the same anxieties and the same fears that you've got at this point in time are likely to still be there when you come back to sit the exams, be that in 3 months or 6 months' time. The counter argument that students would often come up with is that you'll have more time to prepare. But it's not like you get to resit all of the talk phase and the exam prep stage. You don't get all of that time again. You don't get to resit the whole course. So what that could potentially mean for a student is that they need to then juggle kind of the commitments of these exams that they're so anxious about with work at the same time. And then that can become even more challenging and stressful and harder to overcome than the current state of affairs that we're facing. For example, if you deferred just before your exam, if your exam's on, say, the Monday, Tuesday, and it's around Thursday or Friday that you decide that you need to defer, which is probably the most common time that this comes up with students. If you've already completed the exam prep course, then you're not going to have any more opportunities to actually attend college and have access to a tutor, which is the massive benefit, you would hope anyway, unless, of course, you're deciding to pay for an open market course out of your own pocket. And once it gets to that stage, you're really going to just wish that you had a go at the exam, because, as we said before, it's likely that your chances of passing much better than they are in your own head. That can then have a knock-on impact in terms of when you finish the qualification. If you push back your exams, the ultimate date that you've completed everything might be pushed back, and then that can have a knock-on to future promotions and salary bands down the line. So it's a short-term decision, but it can have real kind of long-term implications.
Yeah, really thorough. I mean, two things there. One is that, apprentices wouldn't be paying for things out of their own pockets. They're probably in a slightly different category there, aren't they, when you're talking about that? And the
Mm.
second thing I was thinking about was Was the kind of human impact here? You talked about staying on track, etc. there. What about the kind of personal relationships that you build up with your peers over time? How's that affected?
Yeah, I don't think you can underestimate that as well. There's a kind of a group camaraderie almost when you and your intake are kind of up against the ACA together essentially, and that can be one of the things that really helps you to get through it, because we're not gonna lie about it. The exams are extremely challenging at times, and there will always be points when you do feel that it's really difficult and it's a push for you. So if you defer, then unfortunately it's likely that you'll fall out of step with your intake if you're all from the same firm. As I say, a really important aspect of those college days is building up relationships with your peers and your friends, and you're creating your own support network with your cohort. You're going to be making friends and meeting colleagues, and they're a big part of what gets you through the exams. They provide you with motivation, but they also make college like a lot more fun, and you feel like you're all in it together, and that kind of provides you with an emotional support as well. If you defer your exams, then potentially you may lose the opportunities in college to strengthen those relationships, and that can mean that it's less enjoyable and a bit more challenging down the line as well.
Okay, so you've kind of spoken about the challenges and I suppose the disadvantages to deferring, but are there any advantages to deferrals, Matt, just to be balanced here?
Yeah, I don't want to just kind of close it off as an option and talk around all of the negative side of things, because there is definitely a time and a place for deferrals. And if circumstances aren't right for you, for example, there's something happening in your personal life or with your health, and that means that college and the exams and kind of other stresses within your life are putting an undue burden on you, then deferring can be a good thing. It's just important to remember it can be counterproductive to look at deferrals as a fallback option. I think sometimes you get students where they say, I'll go through college, but I know that if push comes to shove, I can defer. And looking at it as a fallback can be quite unhealthy, because then you're not always 100% committed to the exam process, and you don't get a full picture of exactly where you would be, because you don't necessarily feel the need to push as hard as you can. A degree of exam anxiety is often healthy, but sometimes it's hard to tell what is healthy anxiety and what is unhealthy anxiety. But it can be healthy and it can be necessary for performance to an extent. It comes down to the individual at the end of the day and their own circumstances and their understanding about whether or not the anxiety that they're feeling is reasonable. From my perspective, I had 3 exams to do together. They were professional level exams. I deferred those because I was in a place where I felt like I was too anxious to do those exams. That's where I felt I was at the time, but I was exam ready. And this led to me being out of step with my intake and having to go through the entire process again with less support. And it's definitely something that I not just regret now, but the moment it had happened, because I think I knew that I wasn't in a place where it was truly appropriate to defer, but I did it anyway. I regretted it immediately, and I still do at this point. And it did lead to me, like I say, being the remainder of the ACA being a less enjoyable decision, because I felt like I was doing it on my own and without my cohort as well. Ultimately, deferring can be a good thing, but it should only be a situation where you can identify that singular reason that makes you want to defer, and you're confident that having the extra time, again, be that 3 months or 6 months, you're confident that extra time will fix that. Otherwise, you may never feel ready, but eventually you are going to have to bite the bullet.
Yeah, and you talked there, Matt, about that apprehension and anxiety. And if people are just watching this short recording on its own, do look at one of the recordings we've done on overcoming a fear of failure, because that could really help too. So there we go. We've got the kind of disadvantages. We've spoken about the advantages. So let's kind of have the scenario. I'm an apprentice. I'm a student. I feel myself in the situation where I've considered all of this, and I still think that the deferral is the best option for me. What steps would you recommend to me then?
Sure. So I think the most important and first step is communication, because often this is something that students will be going through in their own head, and they'll kind of be spiraling and considering these options without getting any sort of external perspective. So the first thing to do, speak to your tutor, speak to the people around you, and just be fully transparent about what the situation is. It can feel embarrassing. There's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of at that point in time. And as with all situations that have any sort of link to anxiety, as soon as you communicate it, you will immediately feel a lot better. Your tutor can give you that honest perspective about how you are academically and how you're progressing and what steps you're going to need to take between where you are and where you need to be. It's likely that you're further along in reality than you are in your head. The people around you, maybe in your personal life, they can give you a perspective about where you are mentally and if you're in a position where you should or shouldn't be pushing ahead with the exam, and they can give you that objective perspective. I mean, ultimately, all your employer wants and all Kaplan wants is for you to be successful. It's not always easy to see what the path to success is when you're so stressed and you feel like your mind is clouded by that. If the best way forward for you is to defer, then absolutely we'll support you in that. But the key is to be making a rational decision and an informed decision, and sometimes that needs an external perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Really thorough advice. Thanks, Matt. So I'm just going to maybe pull out three main things from this, three pieces of advice, because we've got a lot of resources and support out there. So first, Matt says communication. Speak to your employer, professional qualification team where relevant, talent coach, friends, family. So communicate this. Okay, one. Two, come to us to the tutor or your academic support function here, because everybody in those roles, they've been there, they'll understand, they'll empathize. So get in touch with them. And finally, three, if this is from a place of concern about your well-being, which is so often the case in the run-up to exams, do refer to our website, which has got some brilliant things there and sources of support on improving our well-being and dealing with anxiety, coping with feeling overwhelmed, that fear of failure, as I mentioned. And we do monthly seminars as well on mind fitness, so they would be helpful. You've got back recordings on our YouTube channel as well, so do use those. And ultimately, if it's getting really overwhelming, come to us and we've got a safeguarding team and all sorts of sources of support that we will have for you. Okay, so we're with you in spirit. Listen to this back, it should be really helpful, and we hope it's helping you to make an informed decision about your future. Thanks very much, everybody.